Hi class, this is a quick lecture on identifying and fixing run-ons. So I'm noticing a lot of things called comma splices in the writing that I'm reading. So this will get you caught up on what you're looking for and how to fix your own sentences and edit them. It's called proofreading. So if there's something about grammar that I would really strongly urge you to commit to memory, it's this, and it's really easy, right? It's really easy to remember, which is that a complete thought has a subject and a predicate, right? So here's our complete thought, here's our equal sign, and we have something called a subject. We have something called a predicate, right? So to know a little bit about that, a subject is not a topic. So, for instance, if we're talking about writing a research essay, someone may use the word topic. Well, here's your topic, and then a synonym for topic is subject. That's not the type of way that we're using this word. So words have multiple definitions. This is grammatical. We're talking strictly about grammar, and the grammatical definition of a subject is who or what does the action. Right, so I'm going to write that really quickly. I'm using my mouse, so that's what those clicking sounds are. And the handwriting is a little bit sloppy since I have to do this with the mouse. Right, so who or what does the action in the sentence? So what we can already tell from the definition of a grammatical subject is that we also have to have actions occurring in that thought. Right, so here we have are viewing. It's a two-word verb for a complete verb. So are is what, for agreement, we have to have the plural form of the verb because students is plural. That's called subject-verb agreement. And then to complete the verb, we need viewing, right, which actually tells us so the reader can imagine what's happening in the sentence. And then this over here is the object of the verb. What is it that they're viewing? They're viewing a presentation. Okay? So just to review, complete thoughts have subjects and predicates. We're not talking about a topic when we say subject. We're using it grammatically speaking, and it means who or what does the action. So run-on occurs when two ideas basically smash together, right? So here we have a little car crash with some, little tin cars. And that's not what we want to do. We don't want to crash our sentences into each other. And the main reason why is because in a professional environment, it puts off a bad image, right? So it gives off the perception that someone is lacking in their fundamentals when it comes to writing if they are unable to identify run-ons and fix them or understand what they are, and then they occur repeatedly. Right? So some of you are probably feeling like this. I sympathize, right? It's hard to fit 15 weeks into a summer session, right? So here we have, I have too much homework. I can't do it all. You can hear me when I say it. I have too much homework. Take a breath. I can't do it all. So if I was saying this verbally, you'd probably hear a little pause right here, right? So this is called a fused sentence. It's a run-on. And it's a type of run-on that's called a fused sentence. There's been no attempt to even indicate that pause when you read it out loud, right? So it's called a fused sentence. So the two sentences literally just ram into each other. There's no punctuation mark. There's no period. There's no comma. There's no semicolon. There's no attempt to try to indicate that these are actually two separate thoughts. We know they're two separate thoughts because here we have a subject, which is I, the pronoun I. Here we have a subject I. We have a predicate, have. Have is our verb. What is it that I have? I have too much homework, right? Over here we have I, our grammatical subject. And we have can't do, right, as our verb. Can't do it all, right? Hopefully you're not feeling that way, or if you are, you're getting over the hump and feeling more motivated. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So just to recap, what we're learning here is that there's something called a fused sentence, and that's when someone just uses zero punctuation between two thoughts. That's fused. So something that you can do as a way to fix it is first of all, you need to be able to recognize when you have a subject and a predicate and where you need to put your breaks in your sentences as you're trying to figure out where the punctuation marks go. If you want to join those two ideas on the previous slide, you can use something called a fanboy, and you can use a method called coordination. So these are called coordinating conjunctions, right? So fanboys is a mnemonic device to remember that it stands for, F is for for, A in fanboys is for and, the N in fanboys is for nor, the B in fanboys is for but, the O in fanboys is for or, the Y in fanboys is for yet, and the S in fanboys is for so. And then here you'll see a comma will always go in front of your coordinating conjunction, aka fanboy. Right? So if I've commented to you on your essay, try to use a fanboys here, try to use a coordinating conjunction. This is what I'm talking about. And there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are only 7 coordinating conjunctions, so it's easy to remember. So let's see that in action. So if we're going to use this method called coordination, I have too much homework, I can't do it all. We know this is called a fused sentence. We don't want to have a fused sentence. We want to proofread our own writing and then fix it. So we realize here, even if I say it out loud, we can hear there should be a little pause here. So let's try a comma and a fanboy. So we'll pick S, right? So S has to do with cause and effect. One thing happens, therefore, we can substitute so, which has the same meaning as therefore, as a result, so I can't do it all. Okay? So let me just draw attention to that again really quickly. So this is fused. We need to put a break here. We decided that we'll use coordination, so we have a comma, and then we use the S in fanboys, which is so. The other thing that you can do is to make one idea dependent on another idea. This is called writing a complex sentence. So I'll write complex. So the other type of sentence on the previous slide is called compound. When you use subordination, you're creating a type of sentence called a complex sentence. And we'll make one idea dependent on the other. And this is a beautiful thing to do instead of just using periods all the time to separate the sentences, because it also transitions. So all of these words here and subordinating conjunctions, there's probably 24, maybe even 36 subordinating conjunctions that you can use. There's lots, right? And what it does is it tells the reader the relationship between two thoughts, right? So here we have cause and effect, just like we had so, which was a cause and effect word, but that's from our fanboys menu. We can decide to use subordination, we'll use because here, right? So here's our subordinating conjunction. Because I have too much homework, if you start with this dependent thought, I'm going to write DC for dependent clause. We have to have a comma here. So you want to remember your punctuation marks with these patterns, and then that goes into the next thought. I feel like I cannot finish it all. That's our independent clause. I'm writing IC. I'm going to review that on the next slide. So Wabbits is just a really easy menu, just like fanboys. It's an easy menu to remember. At least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 subordinating conjunctions. Like I said, there's probably about 2 to 3 dozen subordinating conjunctions. You can look up a whole list of them if you want. Just Google it, subordinating conjunctions list. But Wabbits will kind of get you through some sticky situations if you're kind of stuck and you can't remember. Okay, my teacher said use a subordinating conjunction. I can't remember what they are. Then try the Wabbits. So Wabbits is a mnemonic device. The W stands for when. The A stands for although. The B, the first B stands for because. The second B stands for before. I stands for if. T stands for though. And S stands for since. So this is a little menu of subordinators. So when you're trying to think about how can I make one thought dependent on another thought, create a complex sentence, you have your Wabbits menu hopefully memorized. So I use these abbreviations IC and DC. So here are some definitions, just a little bit of grammar terminology. Is that an independent clause is an idea that can stand alone i.e. it can stand independently. In contrast, and then I use the abbreviation IC for an independent clause. A dependent clause is an idea that cannot stand alone. In other words, it is dependent on another idea for its completion. And so I will abbreviate that as DC, dependent clause. And that's what this says here, that I just use abbreviations if I'm commenting to you or as I diagram sentences on these slides. So here's something to remember about punctuation. So if you have an independent clause as the first part of the sentence, it just smoothly goes right into the dependent clause, and you don't need a punctuation mark here. No punctuation mark needed here. If you have a dependent clause as the first part of the sentence, you have to have a comma here. So that's something to try to remember, is the way that punctuation marks work with this pattern. So when you have a dependent clause starting the sentence first, such as because I have so much homework, comma, I feel like I cannot do it all. Of course we can't. Right? So we'll just review on the next slide. So here's something you can try to do. I'll just pause for 30 seconds or a minute so you can try to figure this out on your own. So try to join clause 1 and clause 2 into a complex thought using appropriate punctuation marks and then using a Wabbits. Right, so our Wabbits, oh, my cats are fighting, is W is for when, A is for although, B is for because, the other B is for before, I is for if, T is for though, and S is for since. So let's find a way to join these two sentences together using one of these subordinating conjunctions. And we'll try it two ways. One with the independent thought first, the other way starting with a dependent thought, and then a comma, and then an independent thought. We'll move on to the answer on the next slide. So if we start off with our dependent clause, and we use a subordinator B for because breakfast is an essential meal of the day, we need to have our comma here. It energizes you for an active morning. The other way that we can do this, we start off with the independent clause and we have the dependent clause in the second part of the sentence. So here we have breakfast energizes you for an active morning because it is an essential meal of the day. So hopefully your sentences look similar to these. So here we have some more sentences we're trying to join together, and just a reminder, we're trying to do this by making one of these thoughts a dependent thought and attaching it to an independent thought. What we don't want to do is just use a comma, right? So we have to have a dependent word and then make a dependent clause and then put in the comma. If you just try to stick in a comma, you end up creating something called a comma splice. So let's try the subordinating conjunction when, right? So look at these two sentences and see if you can join them with when. So if we use when, you can say catching sentence run-ons is easy when you know what you are looking for. So that's an independent clause going right smoothly into the dependent clause. That's the ICDC pattern. The other thing you can do is put the when in the first position, our dependent word, when you know what you're looking for, and then we have a comma. Catching sentence run-ons is easy. So here's another one, let's try two different things. So we're going to review fanboys and we're going to review subordination to join the two ideas together. First sentence is the Santa Ana winds are blowing hard. The second sentence is to not leave flammable materials outside. We have to pick a fanboys that makes sense. What that means is that each of the fanboys has a concept of logic behind it. Right? So for gives a reason and joins two things, nor negates something, but indicates a surprise, or means you have two options, yet kind of indicates surprise, and then so is cause and effect. So works, right? Let's try so. The Santa Ana winds are blowing hard, so do not leave flammable materials outside, right? So do not leave flammable materials outside. And then we can also try to use subordination. And since we already used because, which has to do with cause and effect, let's use another one that's subordination that's also cause and effect. Let's use since. Right, so we could say since the Santa Ana winds are blowing hard, do not, comma, since the Santa Ana winds are blowing hard, comma, do not leave flammable materials outside. Everything's so dry, we don't want to have the fire department chasing us around. So here's the review. You can join sentences together, and you can use them with the dependent thought first and then the independent thought, like we have here. Because the brownies are hot, comma, I will wait 15 minutes before eating them. You can also use a fanboys. So this means simple sentence, and you put a fanboys in the middle. So the brownies are hot, comma, so I will wait 15 minutes before eating them. So here's some sentences you can practice joining together. So just to recap and review, there was a really important thing that I was asking you to remember about grammar, which is that a complete thought has a grammatical subject and it has a predicate. That makes a complete thought. The other thing is that you do not want to write fused sentences, and you want to figure out how to find and fix run-ons. So how to find and fix those comma splices, how to find and fix fused sentences. So in order to do that, we can fix them when they occur by using a fanboys, which is for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And anytime we do that, we have to put a comma in front of the fanboy. So we're learning some punctuation mark patterns that go with the sentence patterns. The other thing you can do is join sentences by using a dependent thought word. We learned our Wabbits menu. And we can put the independent thought first, and then it flows into the dependent thought, or we can have the dependent thought first, and then we need to have a comma, and then have the independent thought. Okay? And then just to make sure everyone remembers, a type of a run-on where there's no punctuation whatsoever, it's a run-on sentence, so that's poor grammar. That's called a fused sentence. We don't want to do that. And then the more common type of sentence that I see in a transfer level writing course is comma splices. Somebody realized there's a little pause between two sentences, but they're not using appropriate punctuation and not using joining words. And that's important to do because joining words, whether you use a fanboys or you use a Wabbits, so whether you coordinate or whether you make a thought dependent on another thought, they transition. So you have a nice transition where you tell your reader how the thoughts relate. So we want to make you feel empowered to where you can proofread and edit your own writing. You don't have to be dependent on a tutor. You don't have to be dependent on your teacher. You just need to know a little bit about grammar and then just practice, practice, practice. So that's what we'll be doing in the activity associated with this. Thanks for your time, you guys. Pretty soon you'll be proofreading your own writing and writing fabulous.